New York City and state are still dealing with the pandemic in so many ways, not the least of which is the housing crisis brought on by financial fallout from COVID.
And on top of that, we've been hearing all week long about the struggle to get public schools up and running in the city, and that's something that could put homeless students at even more of a disadvantage.
Today, New York's Michael Gargiulo recently spoke to the leader of a group trying to help the homeless get through the pandemic.
Well, thanks, guys. We have with us Áine Duggan on Skype. She heads up the Partnership for the Homeless here in the city. Áine, thank you so much for joining us today. So many issues with regarding to homelessness have been in the news, and we want to get to the situation on the Lucerne Hotel and the wider implications of that on the Upper West Side. But we want to talk about another major issue affecting the homeless, the 100,000 New York City school children who experience homelessness at some point during the year. The school year has started for them, but there's a lot of concerns about how it's going to go for them. Tell us about your concerns and what you'd like to see done.
So I think, this is a long-standing issue, and we have been concerned about access to school and education for children in shelters for a number of years now. The statistics tell us that children who experience homelessness and go into the shelter system are less likely to graduate high school. Less than 50% of them end up graduating high school. So the concern is that this contributes to the intergenerational cycle of homelessness. With COVID, the situation has been exacerbated, and many of the families are very confused about what's happening with the school system at the moment, and they're very concerned about the blended learning model and the lack of access to remote learning for many of their children. So there's a lack of information, there's a lack of resources, and the fear is that children and families in shelter will fall even further behind.
Let's turn to the situation in the Upper West Side. We've been reporting on this all week with the Lucerne Hotel. Homeless men specifically housed in this hotel. The city says this is not a permanent solution. There's a higher expense for housing people in a hotel rather than a shelter environment. And the city also says, look, they don't have access to the services they need. But then there's the concern, are we moving people around because of concerns in the neighborhood, in that specific neighborhood there and other neighborhoods? Advocacy groups like your own, how do you approach this issue, and what would you like to see done?
So I think the Upper West Side situation brings a number of issues to the fore, not the least of which is the long-standing discrimination against people experiencing homelessness in the city. It doesn't make any sense. The decision to move people out of the hotels on the Upper West Side is wrong, and it's nonsensical, and it's also going to end up costing the city more money. So moving people out of one facility and then moving people out of another facility in another part of town in order to accommodate the people that you just moved from the first facility. I mean, even as I'm describing it, you can see how nonsensical it is. The number of people being displaced by this decision, it makes no sense. And really what needs to happen is that the vast majority of people on the Upper West Side, and we can see it by the way they're reacting, are compassionate. They are welcoming of the shelter, just as most New Yorkers are in communities around the city. They don't want to see discrimination against people who are experiencing homelessness. And we need to allow their voices to come to the fore, not the handful of voices that are trying to discriminate in this moment. And it's up to our city leadership to make the right decision and do what's right, and to invest money in permanent solutions rather than in reacting to the needs of a very few.
Áine, finally, before we go, I think it's always important to ask this question. How can people help? Help your group, help those among us who are homeless?
So, the largest concern at the moment, actually, is the individuals who are potentially facing eviction in the next few months. So when the eviction moratorium ends, which it's due to do at the beginning of next month, we are looking at hundreds of thousands of families who are in rent arrears and are worried about facing eviction. And so what we've been doing over the last several months is providing private funding, because government has yet to step up to the plate at any level. And so we're providing private funding to landlords and individuals to keep them safely housed. And remember that the cost of shelter is about 3 times as high as the cost of keeping somebody safely housed in the home that they have. And so the best way for people to help in this moment is to contribute to any of the organizations that are doing rental assistance to keep families in their homes, whether it's the partnership or the other 5 or 6 organizations that are at the forefront of doing rental assistance for people in arrears.
Áine Duggan from the Partnership for the Homeless, thanks for joining us. Let's go back to you guys.
Such an important issue, and I'm glad she gave us some ideas on how people can help, because people certainly do want to. It's even an issue there on the Upper West Side. There are groups who didn't want those people moved, and of course others who did. So